Hey guys, what's going on? Jeb here, and in today's video we have some very important technical analysis to do on Bitcoin because as you can see, we've finally seen some movement. Last night, Bitcoin crashed nearly 20% in response to Bitcoin falling below an important uptrend of support, that being this one right here. In yesterday's video, we were talking about how a breakout was most likely to be coming to Bitcoin relatively soon, and if you go back and watch yesterday's video, you'll find that I was slightly bearish on Bitcoin and I was expecting some kind of pullback. And it turns out that that is exactly what we've seen happen. So in today's video, I want to analyze what exactly caused this crash because I think there's a very specific reason why this happened, and I think there's something very important we can learn from it. And I also want to talk about some other news like Google quantum computers and the stock to flow charts that people are attributing to this crash in Bitcoin and whether or not these were as big of factors as people are making them out to be. Guys, I think we have a great video lined up for you today. If you do enjoy today's video, make sure you smash that like button. I would appreciate that. So without much further ado, let's go ahead and dive right on into it. The first thing I want to mention here, guys, is that Bitcoin had a fantastic run up during the beginning of this year. In between February and late June of 2019, Bitcoin saw nearly a 350% rally if we check here. So of course, Bitcoin was going to have to consolidate, guys. Typically, the consolidation is proportional in size to the rally that preceded it, and Bitcoin did indeed rally for quite some time. But furthermore, the fact that Bitcoin went so far into this consolidation pattern and did not break bullish, oftentimes if you have to go that far in a consolidation pattern and you don't have a bullish breakout by then, many times that's actually a sign that you're going to break bearish, and that's exactly what we saw as well. Now, I've seen a lot of different people saying why this happened. For example, people are talking about the CME futures gap. Now, I've seen people talk about a plethora of different reasons why this crash happened. I've seen people talk about the CME futures gap, and yes, Bitcoin correcting did indeed fill that CME futures gap, so now all the CME futures gaps memes can go forth and spread and conquer the cryptocurrency space for the next couple of days. I've also seen people talking about the Google quantum computing story, which we're going to get into in a little bit. I've seen people talk about the 40% drop in the hash rate on Bitcoin's hash rate chart. And of course, last but not least, I've seen a lot of people talking about the descending triangle pattern that Bitcoin was in rather than the symmetrical one that we've been drawing here on our channel. At the end of the day, guys, what matters is that Bitcoin crashed. But of course, guys, one of the most important things that's happened recently is the launch of Bakkt and the seeming failure that it has been. Guys, Bakkt is only trading like 70 Bitcoin. Guys, Bakkt is only trading like 70 Bitcoin right now. It's ridiculous how low the volume is over on Bakkt, and that leads me to the point for today's video. I personally think a big part of the reason that Bitcoin crashed here is Bakkt. And the reason I say that is because a lot of people that were newer to this space, they bought into Bitcoin, they got into Bitcoin seeing this massive run up, and everybody hyped Bakkt up to be a moonshot news story that as soon as it dropped, Bitcoin was going to rally straight to $20,000. And as I've been saying for 3 or 4 months, when Bakkt launches, it's not immediately going to cause a bullish breakout. What Bakkt is going to do is it's going to continue to add bullish buying pressure from Wall Street over the coming years. It's not going to be one moonshot story and then it's done with. But a lot of people seem to buy into the narrative that when Bakkt does launch, Bitcoin is going to moon. And a 24-hour cycle after Bakkt launched and Bitcoin had not yet mooned, I think a lot of the people that were looking forward to that news story and were trying to make a quick buck, they sold their Bitcoin and they pushed Bitcoin below a key level of support, that being this uptrend right here. And when Bitcoin did fall below that, all hell broke loose and Bitcoin fell all the way down here to $8,000. And that right there, guys, is why I don't buy into any of these other news stories. I don't buy into Google quantum being an issue. I'm going to talk about this in a little bit. I also don't buy into the hash rate problem. I also don't buy into the CME futures gap. Because of the timing on this, it seems to me that a lot of people got hyped up for Bakkt, and when Bakkt launched to no real fanfare, people left the market because they realized that Bitcoin is not going to go to $20,000 in the next couple of days. I've seen people in the comment section saying Bitcoin's going to 100K by the end of the year. I've always said, I said this as far back in 2018. You can go back and find me saying this in hundreds of videos. It's probably going to take until the end of Q1 2020, maybe even a little bit later, for Bitcoin to return to $20,000. It's not going to happen overnight. I mean, seriously, look at this bull market back over here in 2015 and 16. Bitcoin started its bull market with a big rally, and then it traded sideways for 200 days. Guys, what are we expecting? Are we really expecting the end of 2017 when we're sitting over here in the beginning of 2016 right now? That's just stupid. It's going to take some time. And guys, I also want to make it very clear, just because Bitcoin had a 15 or 20% correction, that does not mean that the bull market is over. By no stretch does that mean that the bull market is over. In fact, it's actually very characteristic of bull markets to have major corrections during their market cycles. If we look over here in 2017, we see that Bitcoin crashed 30% in the span of 2 days and then went on to rally from $3K to $20,000. Bitcoin did the same thing over here. In the span of a week, Bitcoin crashed 30%. 30%. Right over here, the span of a week, Bitcoin crashed 36%. It happens in bull markets. It's not the end of the world, guys. It's nothing to be freaked out about. I see a lot of people getting worried about this when there's really nothing to be concerned about. Furthermore, Bitcoin is sitting above some very important levels of support right now. If Bitcoin does fall below these, then it might get bad. But for the time being anyway, we haven't done that. Those levels of support, because I know that's one of the things you guys are curious about, are $8,000 and the 200 daily simple moving average. The reason I say both of those is this. Bitcoin never goes below the 200 simple moving average during a bull market. At least it hasn't to date. But keep in mind, we've only had 1 or 2 bull markets in the history of Bitcoin. Bitcoin very rarely goes below this moving average in bull markets, and we are, in fact, in a bull market. People can argue about that all day, but they're wrong. If Bitcoin goes below this, then we might be looking for a $5,000 to $6,000 Bitcoin. But we also have another support level at 8K. And the reason we have a support level at 8K is because of our VPVR. If we look here on our VPVR, we're going to find that it lines up very closely with around $8,000. As we can see right in here, draw a horizontal line, boom, $8,000. The reason that's there is because of all this trading over here. And if Bitcoin does break its support around the 200 simple moving average, we have $8,000 to fall back on. With all that said, a lot of people have pointed this out, and they're absolutely right. If Bitcoin does fall below this very important VPVR level, since we rallied so quickly over here, there's not a lot of room to catch us. As we can see, the VPVR is very thin over here, and that could see Bitcoin pulling back to levels around $5,200. Now, if you want my honest opinion on that, there is a chance that that happens. There's actually a pretty decent chance that that happens. If Bitcoin falls back to $5,200, the bull market is on hold for a little while. That would be a technical break of market structure that would be indicating that the bull market has stopped and paused for a little while. That all being said, Bitcoin is most likely not going to go below one important level of support as well, that being the 200 weekly moving average. That's currently sitting around $4,400, and if you look on the history of Bitcoin, Bitcoin has pretty much never gone below this moving average. During corrections, Bitcoin typically falls back to this and gets support here. We saw it happen in 2015, and we saw it happen earlier in 2018 and 19. If all else fails, support at $4,400 will catch us, and if we fall down to there, it's likely that we'll see a major bounce and a rally all the way back up to all-time highs. Something like this, I believe Alessio Rastani's been talking about some kind of wild card scenario like this. Something like that is possible, and honestly, not that bad. If we come back down here, that's a great buying opportunity in my humble opinion. So with that said, let's talk about a couple of news stories here for just a little while, and we'll wrap it up. Google quantum computer breakthrough, not a risk to Bitcoin, says developer. A lot of people have talked about Google quantum computing causing a major problem in Bitcoin and potentially softening up or hacking the SHA-256 algorithm. Guys, I want to make one thing very clear here. If quantum computing does actually cause SHA-256 to be hackable, or at least soften it up and allow issues with private keys to emerge, the last thing we need to be worried about is Bitcoin. Because guys, I don't think a lot of people realize this. Bitcoin is not the only software that uses SHA-256. The military uses SHA-256. A lot of defense uses SHA-256. A large portion of the global economic system uses SHA-256. If SHA-256 gets hacked, the entire world economy will shut down. There are bigger issues than Bitcoin. But luckily, quantum computing, no matter what happens at Google, is still decades away, and it's actually not that hard to upgrade Bitcoin and all these other protocols from SHA-256 to something like SHA-385 to something like SHA-384 or SHA-512. So if it does happen that quantum computing becomes an issue, really all you have to do is increase the exponent in these programs, and you can push off the issue for a very, very long time. Definitely not a problem to worry about for today. Definitely something that we will have to worry about a decade or two from now, but for right now, this is a non-issue. One thing I also want to mention is this story, which says Bitcoin price at $8,000 bounce now aligns perfectly with the stock to flow chart. If you guys aren't familiar with stock to flow, essentially what that means is it calculates the circulating supply of the cryptocurrency and takes into account how quickly that flow is being increased, how quickly that circulating supply is being increased. Something like gold has a very high stock to flow ratio because there's a lot of gold and there's not a lot of it being made. Bitcoin does as well. There's a lot of Bitcoin and there's not a lot of it being made. When you have a whole lot of something and not a lot of it being made, what that means is that the supply is relatively stable, and the more stable that is based on the stock to flow ratio, the more valuable that asset is intrinsically because the supply can't move. So the only part of the supply and demand curve that can move is the demand. And I know that was a lot really quickly, but if you guys know what stock to flow is, then you know what I'm talking about. To save ourselves from reading this story when we don't really need to, what's going on here is that Bitcoin has pulled back to something I would call the underlying intrinsic value of Bitcoin. They're talking about how the stock to flow chart is predicting it. I've always talked about this concept, guys. It's kind of an invisible moving average that moves through Bitcoin, which is something like the invisible underlying intrinsic value of Bitcoin. What is Bitcoin actually worth? Is it undervalued? Is it overvalued? Is it sitting right on that line? Right now, guys, I think Bitcoin's trading right around where it needs to be. When Bitcoin does see some more development, when Bitcoin does see some more adoption, when even more companies start accepting Bitcoin, when there's hype coming back into it, when the mainstream media starts getting involved again, guys, Bitcoin is going to start rallying. But it might be a few months with Bitcoin trading down here around $8,000. And Bitcoin might even fall lower because of the lack of hype right now. It very well may happen. And if that does happen, you need to be ready for it. There's no reason to get scared about this, guy. Bitcoin has movement. And look, a lot of people seem to forget that you can make money on Bitcoin Bitcoin when it rallies and when it crashes. You can short Bitcoin just as easy as you can long Bitcoin. All you have to do is make an account on the right exchange. If you're in a leverage trade, make sure you have a stop loss. There's no reason that you should ever get liquidated. If you're in a losing trade right now and you bought at $10,500 and you were expecting Bitcoin to rally, all you have to do, and I'm not telling you what to do with your money, this is not financial advice, but consider this. One of the things that you can do with that losing trade, roll it over into your investing portfolio and don't touch that trade for 10 years. I can pretty much promise you that that trade is eventually going to be profitable. There is no reason to get worked up over this, guys. Red is the color of fear, and people who made charts for some reason made crashing the color of red. And when they did that, it just solidified the position that Bitcoin or a market going down is a bad thing, but it's not a bad thing. It's actually a good thing if you know how to play it, because the only thing that is bad is a lack of volatility. And guys, the reason I'm so excited about this is because over the last 48 hours, volatility has returned to Bitcoin, which means the profitability of Bitcoin has also returned to Bitcoin. So guys, I would encourage you not to get scared. I would encourage you not to get worked up. I would encourage you to look for long-term buying opportunities, even though I think the bottom might be a little bit lower. And I would encourage you guys to remember to use everything that Bitcoin does as a learning opportunity. It's not just a reason to get scared. It's not just a reason to get hyped. Everything Bitcoin does is a place that you can learn something. So anyway, guys, that's pretty much going to wrap it up for today's video. I do hope you guys did enjoy that video, and if you did, make sure to smash that like button. It really does help out the channel when you do that. But I do want to thank each and every single last one of you for watching as always, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.
Oh, I got a real good feeling.